listening to the Jeff Rubin Show. I'm Jeff Rubin. This is one of those episodes where I'm going to have to use the introduction to explain what the actual episode is about, because it's something of a very insidery episode. When I started the show, one of the things on my list, one of the interviews I knew I wanted to do was a Nickelodeon game show contestant, because I grew up with Nickelodeon game shows. I think to a degree, I always, even though I used to watch baseball, I think I always enjoyed watching Nickelodeon game shows more than actual sports. And even to this day, I would much rather watch Guts than a baseball game. I'd rather watch as many episodes of Guts as you can fit into a baseball game than any baseball game, or even go to a baseball game. I will gamble on the results of Nickelodeon game shows. It's the only thing I'm willing to bet on. So I knew I wanted to interview a Nickelodeon game show contestant. I always wondered what that was like when you were there, but what I couldn't figure out was how I was going to actually get in touch with a Nickelodeon game show contestant. I mean, how do you reach these people? So I just put out a call on Twitter. I said, does anyone know anyone who was on a Nickelodeon game show? But honestly, when I put that up, I made it general because I just didn't know if we'd find anyone. But secretly, just down deep, I was hoping we could get someone who was on Legends of the Hidden Temple, because that was my favorite out of all of them. Even Double Dare, which I think is probably generally, amongst the literati regarded as the greatest of the Nickelodeon game shows, even Double Dare was really boring, because when you think of a show, you think of a dad like shoulder deep in a giant nose, or the people going through the sandwich. But actually, 95% of the show sounded like this.
Okay, what planet is the fifth farthest from the sun? It's worth $50, or 25 actually. It would be worth 50 if you dared him.
Or like this.
$25 question again. What Greek doctor, known as the father of medicine, was the first to define medicine as a science?
Who gives a shit? Double Dare was primarily composed of questions that would be boring even in a classroom. But Legends of the Hidden Temple did not fuck around. It was all these games that took place in an Aztec temple by way of the young Indiana Jones adventures. And there was one round that was boring questions, and we'll talk about that in the interview. But it had the best games, it had the biggest games, and it had the best final round, the temple. So for those of you who haven't seen the show, let me recap how Legends of the Hidden Temple worked. Basically, you started with 6 teams, and I'm not cheating. Let's see if I can remember them all. There's the Red Jaguars, the Blue Barracudas, the Green Monkeys, Purple Parrots, Orange Iguanas, and Silver Snakes. I'm pretty sure that's correct. There were 6 teams, and they competed in a moat game. Or I think it was usually a moat game. I think it usually took place on a river. And the first 4 teams to finish what was basically a race got to move on to the next round. The 2 teams that didn't get there, boom, you're gone. You don't even get to tell your little anecdote on TV. The parting gift is Nestle Quick, and they're not even going to explain how much Nestle Quick because no one cares. They're just like, take it and be happy you're getting anything. Get out of here. So now you got 4 teams. Then you compete in the boring round, and again, this is something I'm not going to dwell on here because we'll talk about it later. The Steps of Knowledge. The first 2 of those teams to answer 3 questions correctly move on to the Temple Games, and this is really the meat of the show. Here we have the 2 teams competing, and I don't even know how into detail I have to get here, but basically the 2 girls compete in a game. And the winner of that game gets half a pendant. And then the 2 guys compete in a game, and the winner of that game gets half a pendant. And then, no matter what happens, it's still anyone's match. Because the final game is the boy and the girl competing against the other boy and the girl. I didn't even mention that each team's a boy and a girl, but it's a Nickelodeon game show. Anyway, Temple Games, the final round, 1 boy and a girl versus another boy and a girl competing for a full pendant. And whoever has the most pendants moves on to the temple. And if it's tied, I guess they do some sort of tiebreaker. They just rock, paper, scissors for it or something. And then the temple is like, that's why you're watching the show. It's, with all due respect to the Aggro Crag, the greatest final round in any of the Nickelodeon game shows. Basically, it's this giant temple with 3 walls so everyone can see in it. And people have to race to the end, and each room has a puzzle or some sort of obstacle, and you have to race to the end to get something and get out. And along the way, there are temple guards. This is probably more detail than you need to know. There are temple guards who jump out, and if they get you, your partner has to go in, and if the temple guard gets the second partner or time runs out. You lose, but you still go home with some stuff. So that is how Legends of the Hidden Temple worked. And today on the show, we're going to have someone who was not only on Legends of the Hidden Temple, we are also going to be joined by Kirk Fogg, the host of Legends of the Hidden Temple. And before we get to the interview, let's listen to a clip of Kirk setting up the game.
One player from each team is lying on a raft with a rope beneath them. When I say go, they'll paddle their rafts across the moat as quickly as possible. Once they're across, they'll climb out, wrap the rope once around the base of the pole, pull it tight, sit down, bracing themselves with their feet. Then their partner will grab onto the upper rope and walk himself across the lower rope. As soon as the second teammate has stepped onto the deck, it's his job to run over here and hit the gong. The first 4 teams will go on to the next round. Are we ready? Are you ready, Olmec?
Oh, yeah.
On your mark, get set, go!
This is very tense.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Kirk.
Yes.
Hi, this is Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
I'm here with Anthony, who was, I'm sure you remember every single contestant that was ever on the show. Anthony was a Anthony was a blue Barracuda in The Legend of the Buddha's Belly Button. I'm sure you remember the episode.
Oh, my God. That's Anthony?
Hey, Kirk, man. How are you?
Yeah. So weird. I just thought about you yesterday.
That's so crazy, man. Yeah, how have you been? I've been thinking about you, too.
Oh, really? That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's awkward.
Suddenly I feel very awkward.
So I think we're just going to get into it, if that's okay with you.
Okay, let's do that.
We were just saying that I was a huge Legends of the Hidden Temple fan, but I actually have no idea like when the show was on or when new episodes were coming out because it was just perpetually on television, and even still is to this day. How many episodes of the show did you do?
We did 120 shows.
And over how long of a time period?
It's like 3 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. We did 40 episodes in a 3-week period, and we shot it 3 times. So we got 120 shows out of it.
So for all of the hosting I've seen you do of Legends of the Hidden Temple, all of that was confined to 3-week periods.
Yeah, about a year and a half's worth of work.
And yet it's still on. Could you even imagine that all this time later we'd still be talking about it?
No, it's so weird because, this show only came on once a week when it first started. I don't know if you remember that. You probably saw it in reruns, right?
No, I think, when year did it run? I'm pretty sure I saw it when it was actually on the air.
Yeah, so didn't it? It came on once a week on Saturdays, and then after a while, after it started running, then they started playing it more and more, and then, the rest is history.
What years was it, like, actually new episodes of Legends of the Hidden Temple were on the air?
What was that, 92 and 93?
I was born in 1982, so 92, 93 is prime Legends of the Hidden Temple era for me. I'm wondering how you both got involved in the show. Kirk, how did you end up hosting a Nickelodeon game show?
Well, it was a really kind of a strange thing. The company that did the show was called, remember, Stone Stanley. They actually did they didn't even do a pilot of it. They did like a presentation or something to Nickelodeon, and then they didn't hear from them. And then suddenly they called them. Stone Stanley was out here in Southern California, and they got a call and they said, "We want your show." And Stone Stanley said, "Oh, okay, sure, yeah, we're ready to go." And on the fly, they had to cast everybody and crew up and figure out how to put this enormous production on its feet.
It was an enormous production. It always seemed bigger than... I love Double Dare, and I love Figure It Out, but Legends of the Temple always... that temple alone always seems like it put it over the other shows just in the scale of it.
Oh, it was. It wasn't... this is a huge soundstage that we were in, and we had everything in there. We had the moat, and then we had the Steps of Knowledge and all the temple games, and then the backdrop was the temple itself.
On the other side of the equation, Anthony, how did you get to be on the show? Because I always wanted to be on a Nickelodeon game show, but I would never have any idea where to even start. Were you guys on vacation? How did it come up?
No, I grew up in Orlando, and Nickelodeon Studios is on the Universal backlot in Orlando, and so they were always running local casting calls. And so the real trick to, I guess, being on a Nickelodeon game show is just grow up where they're shooting. Because I had so many friends that would wind up on Double Dare and Family Double Dare and Guts and it was just listed in the newspaper, and anybody could come out and just do an open call.
So all those kids were from Orlando?
Like 99% of them were from Orlando, yeah.
Kirk, is that true?
Yes, it would have been lucky break for you to have actually been there exactly when we were shooting and then get cast in that show, because they put the notice out to all the Orlando residents or, the surrounding areas.
If that's the case, how come the grand prize, not only on Legends of the Hidden Temple, but also on Double Dare, was always a trip to Orlando?
Such a ripoff, right?
That really sucked.
I mean, there were a lot of trips otherwise. I won a trip to upstate New York to like a dude ranch, but yeah, most of them were just like Orlando vacations, and I guess you just kind of like put your family in the car and drove 15 minutes and stayed in a hotel.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't send people to Orlando. I don't remember that. I remember it being pretty much outside the state. Isn't that true?
Mine was to New York. I had a friend who was on, and he got a cruise to the Bahamas. So I think they went. I mean, I just remember that show having like really, really crazy production value and a lot of money put into it in comparison to other shows. So I would imagine that the prizes were probably a little better as well.
It was because Stone Family was trying to make their big mark, and try to foray into the kids, Nickelodeon type shows, and they sort of gave, they kind of gave the show away to get a foot in the door, and that actually I think was their only Nickelodeon show they did.
Is that true though? Was the set larger than other Nickelodeon game shows?
Well, I don't know. I know the budget was I don't think anybody made any money on the show. So
I remember it was huge when I got in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, even later on, like I've worked in production for a while now, and I still remember, maybe it was because I was 12, but I remember that set being gigantic, like absolutely gigantic.
And I actually used to run the temple before we'd start the season. I wanted to see if I could get through it. Even with the doors open, I almost wanted to throw up.
Did they set up temple guards to try to stop you?
No, I had 3 minutes to go in and out, and I wanted to throw up when I finished. But I made it out within 3 minutes, but I still wanted to throw up.
I imagine it was also, the temple was, kid size too.
No, it was kind of adult size, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember the rooms being about the same size as my living room at the time. Like,
so
I
you
remember
had the couple guards in there, and they were the grown kids. They were grown-ups.
Oh, that's true, and they seem to fit. So, Anthony, you arrive on this set, this epic temple set. Are you nervous? Like, this seems like a big deal.
Yeah, I remember being really excited and just super nervous. I mean, I was 11 or 12 years old, so I was just blown away because Nickelodeon game shows were the biggest things in the world at that time.
What season were you in?
I was part of the first group of kids.
You were in the first season?
I was in the first season, yeah. And I think I was the second week. I remember you guys. It was the second week of the first season.
How many times did we break down? Do you remember?
I remember one pretty long waiting period. I think there was something up with the pulleys. Like, you remember there was the third round was like the pulleys, or it was like a slide or something like that, and we had pulleys that day and they weren't working or something.
I actually, I just rewatched the episode, and there are both pulleys and slides in your episode.
Oh, wow.
I think the slide you just climb up, that's like a soapy slide. That one was very difficult, Anthony. You won that one by a score of 1-0.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had a bungee cable attached to me, and you had to climb up a slippery incline. Yeah.
I remember that.
That one looked really hard.
Yeah, they were all pretty tough. I'm like, okay, so I was like a super nerdy kid, and I'm still like a huge uncoordinated dork, and they partnered me up with a gymnast, which I remember like getting there.
Wait, go back. How did you meet your partner? Like, what is that like when you meet your partner? How do they pair you up?
So you show up, and there was like a big room full of all the kids for the day, because you guys shot something like, it was like 5 or 8 episodes in a day or something like that. Yeah, and so you would show up, and there was like a group of kids, and there was like either a PA or a second assistant director or somebody who would look at all the kids and just start pairing them off. And you get randomly put with somebody. And I remember you meet the person, and you're sitting down in like the green room or whatever, and you're getting your shirts and you're getting your gear, and you just have like 5 minutes to meet one another.
Did you get along with her?
We got along really well, yeah.
Well, they won. They were the champ. You guys won you won, right? You got the grand prize.
Yes, we did, yeah.
So you had to get along, and that was good. See, that it was at the nerd with the strong person, so you had to kind of have the person who knew how to, smart their way through it, and then the other one had to kind of like muscle their way through.
That's true. Anthony, in your episode on the Steps of Knowledge, which is the trivia round, you actually got all 3 questions right. You're the one that got your team, the Blue Barracudas, into the Temple games.
Yeah, I remember. They tell you the legend once beforehand and then once on the set, and I remember just like sitting with my eyes closed as they told it to me off the set and just trying to memorize every part of it before I went out there.
Kirk, from your perspective, how important is that team chemistry to winning in Legends of the Hidden Temple?
Oh, I think it was everything, because you'd get a couple of big guys in there and they couldn't even get past the moat. So you had to have sort of a kind of a funny combination of kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, we set up before every round, we set up like a system, like a communication system.
You and your partner?
Yeah, to make sure that like on the pulley, we never jumped until the other person said jump, stuff like that. Just like little stuff like that. And I remember thinking we were like super clever for coming up with that, because you're like 11,
I mean, Kirk, you must have seen hundreds of these kids. Is that something every team did?
No, I know, some kids could, I don't know. I think it was just how you felt that day, and like I said, I think it was the luck of the pick or the draw and how they paired you up, and then whether or not, you had to have a lot of luck, I guess, on your way,
I want to go back to something we were just talking about, that Steps of Knowledge round, because, like I said, huge Legends of the Hidden Temple fan. The worst part of that show was when Omek would read the legend, because it was like being in school. It was like all of a sudden there was this history lesson, but it wasn't even about an actual thing that happened in history. It was about these made-up things.
Okay, but here's some behind-the-scenes horror show.
Please, yeah.
The first season, they had me read it. And it was a nightmare, because they wouldn't even have it fixed and ready to go into the teleprompter until about a minute before we started. And oftentimes there was no punctuation. So I had to stop so many times because I realized I was into a second sentence and didn't realize it. And, it was sort of a horror show for me that first season. Finally, that's when they threw it over to Omek and let him do that.
But I think Omek read the legend.
I was about to say, I must have been season 2 then. Because Olmec read for mine, I think. I remember him reading.
Wait, did he read? Oh, he read the legend. Yeah, he read the legend, but then I actually I know what I did.
You did the questions.
I had, no, not the questions. I had to actually, not in the Steps of Knowledge, but I actually had to read the intro into the game.
Oh, I was going to ask about that, because in the one I watched, this Anthony episode, I've probably seen all of them. In the one I watched this week, the game is somewhat confusing, and the explanation is extremely long. And I was wondering if, like, they only get to hear you explain it that once, or you explain it, and then they're like, all right, anyone have any questions? And we're just not seeing that part.
Well, it was terrible. That first season, they were having me do way too much, and I was on my own out there. I'm not, I take responsibility for it, but they made me, I had to do everything. I had to intro the show. I had to, I had to do almost everything. And it was really, and I had to officiate the game, which I didn't really know that well because we only had so much time to learn the games, because the games were really not brought out and learned until, before the show started. And so I had to kind of learn everything. And they realized that into that first season was just way too much. So they started delegating it more to Olmec. And so it allowed me to free up and sort of have a good time.
One element of...
That's why we won Best Game Show the second year.
You won what?
We won Best Game Show the second year.
From who?
From Cable A.
Oh, cool. So that's like not just Best Kids Game Show, it's Best Game Show.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, and I watched a ton of these then, and when Nickelodeon Games and Sports came out and I was in college, I watched a ton of them again. I really do think Legends of the Hidden Temple is the one that stands up the best.
It seems like it does, and I just ran into, I have kids now, and I have a 9-year-old kid who's in a band, and he has a teacher who's in college, or out of college. He's like 28 years old, and he finally realized I was the host of Legends of the Temple, and he was like, it's like, thank you so much.
One element of your performance, of all these things that you did that really impressed me watching this episode again, was that you're also calling the match. You're doing a play-by-play on all of the temple games. I want to play a clip right now just so people understand what we're talking about of you calling the game. This is going to be when you calling the Blue Barracudas, Anthony's team, winning that first entrance, the moat game.
Red Jaguars losing a little bit of the direction. They got to come on back without slipping off. Green Monkeys out first, along with the Blue Barracudas and the Orange Iguanas. Purple Parrots and Silver Snakes still struggling to make it, but they're coming on. Red Jaguars got to get that rope tight. Everybody's got to get that rope tight. Blue Barracudas might want to bring their rope down. And here come the Blue Barracudas, the Green Monkeys, the Orange Iguanas, and the Red Jaguars now getting back on track. Blue Barracudas ring in first. There are the Green Monkeys. Red Jaguars just fell off. Had to go back.
Was that difficult? Was that something you had a background in?
No, well, to be honest with you, that's how I actually got the game show. They only had me do one thing, because they just brought me in to audition for this show, and all they had me do was read a play-by-play thing of somebody going through a temple. I knew nothing about the show, but I saw this play-by-play, and it reminded me of my brother and I. We used to watch football all the time, and we used to do, he gets the ball at the 10-yard line, he goes to the 15, the 20, he rolls over to the 35, it looks like he's going to break another tackle, he's going to make it all the way, he's going to go, touchdown, so it's like, they kind of knew how to do that. So it's like, he goes to the temple, oh, he falls down, and oh, he gets back up, and oh, look out, there's a temple guard. So it's sort of the same thing.
Did you ever have any difficulty? Because I imagine at some point, there must have been kids that were just not going at all. And you have to be, obviously, you can't be like, uh-oh, Green Monkey's just not getting it. They just do not understand this game. You still have to be very positive about it. Was that a challenge?
Yeah, I guess it was. It was, you always had to just stay positive and keep people moving. And, they were competing, so if they weren't competing, somebody else was going to. So you just, you try to keep them going the best you could, and, hope they didn't break down and cry, which they did sometimes.
Who cried? That actually was on my list of things I wanted to ask you. There were crying children at points?
There was one, the only one I remember was the classic, was when somebody got all upside down in that pit of despair, and then they vomited into the...
Did that make it to air?
No, cut. That's a cut.
So what do you do in that situation? You rerun the whole temple?
No, we had to, you know what they do? They got her cleaned up and calmed down. They had to take her out because she was hysterically crying and vomiting, and then they got her calmed down, and then they put her back into that spot and rerun exactly where we were time-wise, and then let her go from there.
I want to talk about the temple itself. Kirk, this seems like one of the hardest final rounds in all of game shows. It seemed trickier than the slopsticle course on Double Dare. The figure it out final round was a joke. Let's pretend the show was still on for a second. What advice would you give a kid on how to get through the temple?
I guess don't get stuck too long doing one thing. You just have to go with the flow. If it's not working for you, you got to do the next thing. And if you can, listen, because people are screaming in the audience how to do it, so that sure helps too. I
remember there was beforehand, there was a PA came up to us with a map of the temple and sat me down and was like, which way are you going to go through this temple? And he was like, tell me which way you're planning on going through the temple. And I would draw these little routes, and he would tell me where he thought that they were going to put guards, just based on past episodes and stuff like that. So they gave you a little bit of help in the beginning before you went out there.
And they did. You're right, and that's exactly right. They had to do that because they had to set the kids up for success. Because if they didn't have a clue as to how they were going to get in, they probably wouldn't get very far. So they'd have to get their minds on, well, I'm going to go this way and this way and this way. So that way they do keep moving forward and not just get locked up, Well,
it was super intimidating because it was, like you said, it was built on an adult scale, and you're like an 11-year-old kid, and I was a particularly tiny kid. And I remember they were walking us through the temple, and I was like, oh, man, this is going to be so crazy. This is going to be so hard.
Did you get a practice run, or you mean they're walking you through on paper?
They walk you through the actual temple itself. And I remember they particularly showed us how the silver monkey works.
Silver monkey is the one that everyone remembers. Is that something I'm not remembering correctly, or is that where most people got stuck, Kirk?
You get really stuck trying to solve that puzzle up there with that monkey.
Kids were. I remember being really tiny, and the actual stick, the pole on the head of the monkey that you had to stick through that hit the button was super long, and you had all these tiny kids that would try to grab the head of the monkey, and the pole would be too long when you were grabbing it from the top, and I think they just kind of wanted you to practice the actual motion of it so you didn't get caught up forever.
I wish I had that monkey.
Did you get to keep any of the stuff?
I didn't. I was supposed to. You know why? Because we didn't know we weren't coming back again. So, if you knew you weren't coming back, you just start grabbing stuff. I didn't have that opportunity.
Somewhere, someone's got a temple pendant just like hanging on their mantle or something.
Anthony, did you keep anything? Do you have like your original Blue Barracuda shirt?
I had the shirt for a really long time, and I remember I had it up until I like moved to college, because they gave me like a pretty big shirt, and I just kept growing into it. So I felt like, oh wow, that's kind of awesome. And then I went away to college, and I moved. I either moved home for a summer, or I moved to an apartment, and I lost it somewhere. And I remember like tearing through boxes at one time, just being like, I have to still have this thing, right? And then I guess it was just gone.
Did you ever bust it and wear it?
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Did you ever bust it out and wear it around friends or in college or anything like that?
For Halloween, I was a contestant on Legends of the Hidden Temple. that came in really handy.
A costume I have seen people that are even not on Legends of the Hidden Temple do. I've seen that's a costume that comes up. I mean, that still to this day, many people dress up like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think somebody showed me the other day that there's a site where you can get like all the different teams now. You can like pick your shirt.
Right.
I've looked. I'm not the only person I know that does this, and maybe that says more about the people I hang out with than how popular it is. But I have looked on eBay for that piece of the aggro crag you got when you won Guts, like several times.
My friend had one.
He won it?
My friend Sarah had a piece of the aggro crag.
Like
yeah.
she won it. She earned it.
She won it. Yeah. Because like I said, we all grew up in Orlando, so everybody was like on these shows. And sometimes if they really liked you or they really liked your family, they'd actually have casting directors call you. And I think Sarah had been on Double Dare, Family Double Dare, and Guts.
She's like a pro. She's not even nervous anymore.
She had been on like all of them, and I think Guts was the last one that she was on, and she actually won that one.
So, Anthony, for you actually, your team, your Blue Barracudas actually had a pretty interesting run through the temple in that you actually never set foot in the temple. Your partner,
I never went in.
The gymnast, who said she goes by Ricochet, right?
Yes.
Oh, I remember this now. I remember this girl.
Really?
What? Yeah, I do. What did she look like?
We looked almost exactly identical, I think. I remember my mom telling me that she was looking down, she was sitting next to the girl's mother, and they were looking down, and they couldn't tell which one of us was which. I think she had like short, dark hair, and we were both just like super tiny and thin.
She did it. She went all the way through herself.
How do you remember that, Kirk?
I do. Well, yeah, I do, because there wasn't that many winners. So.
No, it was hard to win.
You can only do 8 a year.
And wait, you can only do 8 a year?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It means you could only. They only had a budget for 8, wins for a season. So it wasn't like they panic sometimes, because sometimes you get a lot of wins up front in the season, and they're like, oh my God, we're going to run out of money. But, it all seemed to work out. Maybe they made it tougher. I don't know. And they didn't want.
It's amazing to me you remember, because like you said, not many people won, and very rarely do you. I mean, first of all, you got to get 2 pendants to win. The way the game show worked is that there were the temple. I'm telling the audience. I'm not telling you guys. Kirk, I'm sure you remember. But there were 3 games where you could win pendants, which would help you in the temple, and you had to win all 3 games to get 2 full pendants. And if you didn't have 2 full pendants, you didn't even need to bother stepping foot in the temple. It was almost impossible to make it out of there. Is that true?
Yeah, you kind of need to be fully loaded. To get in.
And each partner, correct me if I'm wrong here, each partner got to keep a pendant. So it was very hard to make it through with just 1 pendant, but Ricochet did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you look very excited at the end of the show, Anthony. I just watched it. You know, you're jumping when she comes back. But it must have been at least a little disappointing that you didn't get to go into the temple itself. Did they let you get a run through at the end?
Well, like I said, they do the walkthrough, so I got to go in the temple and mess around in the temple, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of a bummer, but at the same time we won, so I was pretty okay with it.
We were all really excited at the end, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I have to,
and I felt like I had helped out a little bit when we sat down beforehand and like planned it out, and I kind of remember, like I said, I was like a clumsy, nerdy kid, and I kind of remember thinking, if she doesn't get through this thing, especially like as the timer started running down, I was like, if she doesn't get through this thing and I have to go in there, it's going to be problems.
Kirk, I have to assume it must have been more fun for you to root for the kids, right?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I was completely into it if somebody was going to make it through that temple. I knew how hard it was. I knew it was a crapshoot to get through that thing. I knew you had to have certain breaks. You know, you couldn't get locked up in one room too long, and things kind of had to go your way. And you could sense it right off the bat if somebody was going to get, it wasn't going to happen. But so when it started happening, the excitement builds and everybody feels it. I mean, all the producers, and we're all screaming and yelling out there. Everybody wants everybody to win.
So Anthony, when you get back to school, I'm imagining this must be very high stakes. Did people know you were on the show? Did you talk? Did you tell other people? Were you teased about? Did you brag?
I mean, because I was on the first season, nobody knew what the show was. So it wasn't like when you went on Double Dare and you came back and you were like, guys, I was on Double Dare. Like, everybody knew what that was. Nobody knew what Legends of the Hidden Temple was yet. And I think it's a bigger deal to people now. Like, when my friends find out, I think it actually blows them away more now because the show like really grew in popularity over time.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. In the first 3 years, it really was kind of quiet, and it really was quiet until I think you guys grew up and got into high school and into college, and that's when the resurgence of Legends of the Hidden Temple, at least in the memory. It's kind of like me growing up and watching, shows, Gilligan's Island or something like that, and Yeah,
well, I think it's got a lot to do with like you were saying earlier, Jeff. It's like when you go back and you watch like one of these older shows or one of these other shows like Double Dare, and then you watch Legends of the Hidden Temple, and you really see how much was put into it. You kind of think back on it, and you're like, wow, that was really impressive. The other one that I think that I was equally impressive to me was Finders Keepers, the one where they let you tear apart an entire full-size house.
That was cool, but Finders Keepers was a little before my time. I have vague recollections of it, but I feel like that was like mid-'80s when I was very, very young, whereas Legends of the Hidden Temple was 92, 93. I was like 10, 11 years old, which is probably perfect Legends of the Hidden Temple age. I'm having a lot of trouble saying the words Legends of the Hidden Temple. It's tough to get out.
You have to say legend. Legend. That sounds like Harry Carey.
Legends of the Hidden Temple. Speaking of announcing it and being very dramatic about it, I want to talk about OMEC for a little bit. How did the OMEC system work? OMEC, for those who didn't watch the show, was a giant stone head who was Kirk's co-host.
Yeah.
And which is I guess kind of gimmicky, but also, kind of cool. Like Double Dare, Mark Summers just had Harvey. You had this giant stone head.
Yeah, thank God I had a stone head.
How did that system work? Who was behind OMEC?
OMEC. I mean, Dee Baker. He was right behind it. He had to do the lever. He had to make the mouth move, and he had to speak into the microphone at the same time.
I remember seeing him after the first round. Like, after the first round, they introduced us to him. I think it was something where they just wanted our natural, like, on-set reaction to hearing Olmec talking to us. But then afterwards, you see him, and he's kind of like, he was like this skinny guy. And I remember he was wearing, like, those like, mid-'90s Airwalk skate pants and, like, some sandals. And I remember seeing him and just being like, it's Shaggy from Scooby-Doo behind there.
It totally was. I tell you, I have to say that I was responsible for Dee Baker's career. And Dee Baker has had a career.
Wait, who is Dee Baker?
And Dee Baker was the voice of Olmec, and he has turned out to be a huge, huge success here in L.A., and he's done everything.
Is he Oswald from the Drew Carey Show? Am I making that up?
I don't even know.
That's Dietrich Bader.
Oh, who is Dee Baker? What else has he done?
He was in, he does voiceover for everything. He was in Avatar. He does movies. He does cartoons. He does everything. And when I met him, he was such a great talent. Did he ever do his dinosaur for you guys?
Oh, he did like a raptor walk or something.
Yes, he did.
I remember
Great
that.
dinosaur. And he was so good at it. And then I remember go out to dinner with he and his wife, and I used to say, Dee, you got to get out of Orlando. You've got to come to L.A., and I think you got to come now. Don't mess around anymore. Get out here now. And he actually came out, and he stayed in my house for a while, and boy, he caught on, and he got a career going, and he hasn't stopped.
I like the idea of Kirk and Omek living together. I want to go back and put that in my 10-year-old self's head.
Yeah, that is kind of weird, but he was staying in my little writing office across from my courtyard.
The show, this was 91, 93, almost 20 years ago. Anthony, what have you been up to since?
Well, I'm out in San Francisco now. I work for Revision 3.
Which do a ton of great podcasts and online shows and...
Yeah, we do like Dig Nation and Totally Rad Show and all that stuff. I just finished up, for the last 3 years, I was doing a show about independent video games called Bite Jacker, and I'm gearing up to do a new video game review show in the next couple months.
Cool. How about you?
Yeah.
How about you, Kirk? What have you been up to?
Well, I've continued through my entire 25 years in the business. I've continued to do commercials. And I stayed, pretty busy every year doing that. And then at the same time, I learned and picked up a new career in. I'm one of those flipping houses guys.
Oh, cool.
I'm like flipping out, but without the show.
Same temperament and everything.
Yeah, slightly same temperament, not exactly the same temperament.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me and reminiscing about this show that happened so long ago. I think it says something that, people are still so into it that they stay on top of it on the internet. And, thanks for making this show, Kirk, and congratulations on winning Anthony.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you, Anthony, again, and thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk about legends.
Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, Anthony. I really hope you guys enjoyed that because it was a treat for me. Thanks for listening to the show this week. I'm so glad I started this show because really what I needed was another web page I could refresh obsessively, and now the show's homepage on iTunes serves that function. So head to iTunes and leave a review. Trust me, I'm going to see it and I will appreciate it. You'll know about the next episode if you follow my blog at jeffrubin.com or my Twitter at jeffrubinshow or go to my Facebook fan page. See you guys next week.